りおしまい。
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
and your host on the right, Brock,
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. On this episode, we're talking about Dragon Ball as usual, and in particular, we're talking about episode 99, which is called Tien's Insurrection. Just a few housekeeping things. I've updated the Discord, so if you're watching this live or in the premiere, the Discord link should work until next week. I guess, right?
What does it last? 1 week, 2 weeks?
Something like that, 1 week or 2 weeks. Anyways, other than that, I don't think we have any housekeeping stuff to get through. We're going to be able to release more content once we get rolling here in this summer. So we're excited for that. Anything you have to add, Brock?
No, I think that this is just all gas ahead.
Oh, yeah. It's fire, fire, fire. And here we go. So without further ado, this is episode 99, Tien's Insurrection. So the first thing we see is Chaozu continues to paralyze Goku at the behest of Shen. If you remember in the last episode, it ended off with Goku being mysteriously frozen in the air by Chaozu, his psychic abilities. This allows Tien to brutalize Goku during the match, almost sending him out of bounds. Goku uses a Kamehameha wave to avoid the ring out, but this has only stalled the next Chaozu strike. Goku repeatedly tells Tien that he's acting unfairly, but Tien only scoffs at the notion. So that's the first little bit here. We also see that Launch has had enough of Shen's interference as well and tries to go attack him with a mallet. He easily deflects the mallet and sends her flying. So in this little bit, we this is a good glimpse into the way that Tien is allowing himself to be manipulated, because he is oblivious. He's unconscious to the, let's say, the detrimental effects of the path that he's currently on. And that can be embodied by the way Shen uses Chaozu to freeze Goku, let's say.
Well, also, Goku using the Kamehameha to not get hit with the ring out is the same thing as him calling out the reality of what's happening, right? And it's that willful blindness that Tien carries with him that sort of guards him against the Kamehameha, right?
Right, and that assurity and already enlightenment that allows him to be immune. But And to reiterate as well, Chaozu's ability here is the ability for malice to be wielded by an innocent child. That notion is enough to stop, like we said, Krillin last time, and in this one, Goku in his tracks. And the holy path that Goku travels, um, can be shook and stopped by that notion, that idea that the innocent of the world are capable of malice, in this regard.
Mm-hmm. And that's an aspect of sort of Tien's being, right? We've talked a bit about how Chaozu is this dead child haunting him, and it's sort of that absence of the good oriented childhood spirit, right? And so it is a malicious, more primordial spirit.
Yes, and that is going to go into how Chaozu kind of acts in the rest of the series. Is you really have to view him as that kind of that innocence and childhood that Tien had to intentionally subjugate in order to progress in the way he has.
In order to sort of demoralize people, right? Because I think that's what the demoralizing spirit does is it squashes the innocence and sort of the carefree nature or the hopefulness in somebody, right?
Well, right, and I mean, think about like Columbine. Why do shooters target kids?
Right.
Because they're innocent, right? And that's the whole idea here. And Shen has Chaozu because he is making a point with it, right? That this innocence is something that can be corrupted, and for Tien to intentionally not see that, right, says something. And I think his once he's able to see it, there's no turning back, and we're gonna get to that in just a
That's what
second.
Roshi told him, right?
Right, exactly. Step into the world of light is what Roshi says. And so Tien refuses to even acknowledge it. And you're right about the Kamehameha wave, right? He's calling out, well, not necessarily calling out, but he's using his ability to create order out of chaos in the sense that he is reorienting himself into the hierarchy with the Kamehameha wave. And
Well, he's speaking the truth of the situation, right? Which is that an unfair attack isn't something that should be knocking the heroic spirit out of contention as to being the most elevated mode of being, right? And so he can use the Kamehameha. He can point out the unfairness of the assault that he's getting to stay relevant to this fight because that's the spirit of the fight. That's him expelling his spirit, right? So he can't use truth against Tien because Tien's unaffected by it. Tien, if he used the Kamehameha towards Tien,
right, but
it would just push him
the
away,
truth that
right?
he's cheating, right, is
Exactly.
what he's able
And
to
so that
propel himself.
it stops him from being, since he's the heroic sort of archetype specifically, it's like you can look at stories about someone who's heroic that's being treated unfairly, and it's almost like the nature sides with that hero, right? And that's sort of what's happening here, where he's saying, like, I can project my spirit in the sense that I can say that this is unfair and remain relevant to being the most noble mode of
Well,
being
let me break
with
it
that
out.
spoken and expressed,
Let me
right?
break it down this way. The idea that the innocent of the world are capable of malice, and that those who are supposed to be their benefactors are the ones that are causing them to do it, is such knowledge that it plunges Goku into the unknown, and his ability to sort that unknown out into order allows him to reorient himself into the hierarchy, even though he was almost ringed out. I just want to
Right,
encapsulate what he
that
was
that's part of it, yeah. Not exactly what I was saying, but generally, yeah. But my point boiled down is saying that him speaking the truth is something that reveals that he is still relevant to this hierarchy, right? That the truth that he's being cheated, that he's being
Yeah,
essentially,
yeah, yeah. That's what I said earlier
yeah,
too.
it keeps the faith in the heroic spirit by being revealed as, fairness is a judge ultimately of what the best spirit is in something like this. And we see that Tien respects that as well.
Because as we see, when Tien is called out for cheating, he pretty much denies it. And so, just as Tien is about to land the finishing blow, he notices Shen's presence, and Goku crawls toward Tien, declaring him false. The Crane Hermit then orders Tien to kill Goku, reminding him of his revenge owed to Tao. In a moment of ego death, Tien realizes he must defy his master. Upon learning of this rebellion, Shin orders Chaozu to paralyze them both, only for Chaozu to also defy the Crane Hermit. Just as Shin is about to kill Chaozu, though, Roshi sends him flying with a Kamehameha wave of his own. And so, right, that
Oh, it's so good.
I know the way it's visually represented with the clouds that come over. So for in that moment of ego death, it starts off in the sun, and then it shows Tien, and he gets covered in clouds, and then at the end he gets a shining light in his third eye, while the clouds are overhead, and then at the end he's back in the sunlight, and he's resolved to not kill Goku, not get revenge. Let's say.
That he doesn't want to be an assassin after all, and that he cares more about the spirit of the fight and actually being the world's best.
And elevating his aim past what he already can instantiate.
Right.
And so there's a couple things that we need to talk about here. Crane Hermit almost killing Chaozu, for example. That idea is the, let's say, antichrist version of Roshi, right?
And Krillin.
The devouring father, right? That if expectations are not met, the father will devour the son. In this case, Chaozu.
And you see the flip side of it is this whole fight, Krillin keeps on being doubtful of Goku, and Roshi is reminding him of how tough he is and how smart he's being and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a real inversion because Chaozu really functions like a Krillin for Tien, right? But he is this sort of different spirit for him to be carrying with him.
I don't know if I don't know if it's the exact same.
What I mean is, you see on one end of the ring, you've got Crane Hermit and Chaozu.
No,
On the other end,
I
you've
know
got
what
Roshi
you mean
and
by that.
Krillin,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
And so Krillin is serving as sort of this judge of, not really a judge, but he's trying to take in the wisdom of Goku, right? And Roshi is helping him do that. But what Crane Hermit is doing is diminishing the spirit of Tien in the fight through Chaozu, right?
Yeah, he's
doing
undermining
the exact opposite of it.
Mm-hmm. And so, by undermining that spirit, Tien realizes that the path he's on is self-destructive, and so he defies the Crane Hermit. He tells him to leave him alone, and that inspires Chaozu. And there's a point to that, right? The whole thing with the whole relationship between Chaozu and Tien. This is why I was kind of disagreeing with you about Goku and Krillin being analogous. There are aspects of it that are, but the way that Tien nurtures Chaozu is almost like a brother or an older brother, right?
Right.
Where it's not necessarily Goku's the older brother, Krillin's the older brother. They're almost peers in a sense. But it is like Tien actually nurtures him, and it's almost like it's his own ghostly childhood that he killed in the past to become the merciless assassin that he's trying to be.
Right.
And so that whole aspect of it allows his undead, ghostly childhood spirit to revive itself in, let's say, fortitude. And he's able to stand up to Shen. And he tells him no, he's not going to use his psychic ability to use on Goku again. And that idea that the idea that Crane Hermit's authority can be subverted by a spirit which raises up others is so much and so disgusting to the Crane Hermit because of his mode of being that he has no choice but to destroy that which he's created. And Roshi,
so this is where we need to talk about sight and attention, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, we got this, we got that, yeah.
And specifically, we have Roshi's broken glasses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that Goku could put the glasses on and how that terrified the Crane Hermit, right? The whole reason that he's doing this is the Crane Hermit sees that Goku can willingly blind himself. He can integrate that blindness and still keep a perspective so that it doesn't actually blind him. He can integrate
He
the
can
blindness of
integrate
the
the
father
yeah.
into his mode of being in order to be able to face people like Tien and integrate only what's necessary, right? And so he's
It's cloaking himself in the strength of his
but
ancestors, let's
do
say,
you
or
think
the
that the
wisdom of
crane
the
hermit,
past.
for instance, could take off the sunglasses? Would he be willing to? And we know that he's not because he's not participating in the fight.
Yeah,
And the
exactly.
opposite of that, right, is Jackie Chun and Master Roshi.
Yes.
And so the breaking of the sunglasses revealed Master Roshi for being noble, more noble than the Crane Hermit was, right? And that's why the Crane Hermit is lashing out like this, I think, because he's saying my mode of being has to be better. Kill him. We need to snuff out what comes from that understanding of understanding that my way of seeing the world is not the final scene, right?
Well, and that's to say, like, the adversarial spirit that Crane Hermit has adopted is rooted out by truth and um what do I want to say? Truth and truth.
Truth and attention, right?
Truth and attention and
And that's the thing about Tien, right?
no, what I was gonna say. Okay, yeah. So truth and attention and the phenomenon of the raising of spiritual strength, and that being by Tien's participation in the hierarchy, he raises the spirit of those around him, being
Yes.
Chaozu. That is the final straw for Shen, and that's what has to be what sends him out of here.
Now, something I love about the design and just the way that they use the sunglasses, for instance, is that if Tien were to be wearing the sunglasses, right, if he put on Roshi's sunglasses or a regular pair of sunglasses, he still would not be able to protect himself from the solar flare. That is a feature of Tien, right? That he cannot ignore the light, the enlightenment of the situation. And Roshi had called this out. He said that you can't turn away from the light at the end of the day. Meaning, if you try to
Hmm.
see things the way your master sees them, it still won't hold you back from becoming better.
And so, in the darkness, as the clouds come overhead, Tien's eye shines
Right?
with
It
a light.
glows.
Meaning it's that enlightenment that he's discovered in the chaos that he submerged himself in by interacting with Goku, which has upturned his worldview. And by seeing
And
that,
his interactions with Roshi.
and Shen. But yeah. So all this stuff. But that recognition of it has finally arrived and he can't turn back from it. And so when the clouds come back over, it's not the same Tien that we saw a second
Right.
ago. And so he has undergone the metamorphosis, the transformation that has made him a better person, which is the next thing that we see after
The Kamehameha wave.
after the
Right.
Kamehameha wave is
Which, which just to solidify what we were saying, that is Roshi speaking the truth of his mode of being and how superior it is to the Crane Hermit's mode of being. Because he's revealed, right? His veil has been torn. And Krillin is starting to recognize him as Jackie Chun. And so the truth of this is the mode of being that you're trying to tear down, but ultimately you're spiteful against because you're willfully not living up to it, right? By revealing that discordance, it banishes him.
See, I was thinking it was more of the duality between how they react to the uplifting of spirits because Roshi is happy to see that Krillin's spirit is raised by Goku's abilities. Like Goku's performance raises his Krillin's sights, right? And the idea of that, and the idea that, uh, and this is something I'm going to talk about next episode too, but the idea that Chaozu's aim can be elevated by Tien's performance in this match is the last straw for Shen. And so because it's those two things, right? That's when Roshi can call out like this is the difference between us. Like there
He's the
are
only one that's still blind in the situation, right?
yeah. And so he is able to use his power of logos, right, to take the unknown that Shen hides himself in by wearing the sunglasses and blast him off using that and create order out of that, right? Remove that from the situation. It's almost it's something similar to what he did in the first or the 21st Tenkaichi Budokai by removing the moon. This is a power of the spiritual father to remove those proclivities and yeah, I would say proclivities towards an antithetical path. So Goku transforming into the great ape, for example, an antithetical path to what Goku needs to do. Shen following Shen, Tien is on an antithetical path by following Shen. And so he's able to remove that, but this time
Right. He destroys the moon for him.
for Tien. He
Right.
destroys the moon for Tien by doing this.
Right.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Right. That orientation away from the sun, but is also an elevated view. Right.
Exactly, yes.
The wrong attention, because a lot of what we're talking about here is attention and what you put your attention on, and Tien's attention is towards what we could symbolically call the moon, which is not following the solar father, not following that true enlightenment, right?
And almost shunning enlightenment as after acknowledging it. That's what we've been talking about with this whole 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai and why Tien has the third eye and all that stuff. It's because he already knows that the path he's on. Oh, that was 105. I accidentally did that. He knows the path he's on is an unholy one, but he chooses to stay on it. And that's something that he's grappled with throughout. And we've seen his interactions with Roshi. And finally, at this point, he stepped into the light, literally stepped into the light from the visual representation of the show, and is now, as Goku says, a better person.
Right, explicitly, right? Calling out that this is really what the game is.
And so
I also
Tien has elevated his spirit
yeah.
by interacting with Goku.
Well, I also want to point out this is what Roshi does with the Kamehameha, right?
Mm-hmm.
He blows up Fire Mountain, right? He uses it to destroy the moon whenever that's the thing that's keeping Goku from subordinating himself to the proper aim, right?
Yeah.
And then he does the same thing with Tien, with blowing away that
Mm-hmm.
master. And each one is like a symbol of something that you would subordinate yourself to, right? Like the Fire Mountain is sort of this corrupted kingdom with a societal father that's been blinded in his own sense, right? And so there's an attack on that. Not towards the father, but towards more the symbol, right? And then the same thing with separating Goku from the moon, or the same thing as like casting Sun Wukong from the heavenly realms, right? And then that severance also, where it's like I'm going to finally separate you from the corrupted teachings of the the false master or the blind
But
master.
Tien had to come to his own decision for that to even happen in the first place.
He had to personally
because the whole
separate himself.
dynamic that Tien and Chaozu exhibit, or let's say the dynamic between the three of them, lays bare Shin's weaknesses, and then Roshi's
Right,
able
it has
to
to be
say,
asked
"This
for.
is your weakness. See you later."
The same
Right?
thing as Fire Mountain, right? Where he has
Yeah.
to subordinate himself to him, bow to him, and say, I'll do what's necessary to put this fire out, right?
Right, and so he symbolically does that to Roshi by rejecting.
Because what
Shin.
Roshi told him to do wasn't follow me. He said separate yourself from the influence of
Shin, and he does
Shin.
that exactly, yeah. And so by doing that, he's on the path, and we see Chaozu smile for the first time, or be happy and joyous for the first time,
Right.
besides being
Finally.
finally, and it goes to show that mirroring that Chaozu is of him. And so Tien, having raised the ethic by which he operates, faces Goku, now having nothing to lose. Again, the two fighters lock up, but Tien receives a beating at Goku's hands. At last revealing that it was in the spirit of fair play, Tien admits to allowing Goku to damage him. However, Tien also states that his next technique will eliminate Goku for sure. The four-arm technique sprouts 2 additional arms from Tien's back, and he towers over Goku, ready to become number 1 under the heavens. And so the last little thing we need to talk about with this episode is Tien's first actions after he's kind of been reborn. And his first action is to allow Goku to damage him approximately as much as Tien had damaged Goku when Shin had convinced Chaozu to cheat.
Now, this is a willingness on Tien's part to take on the sins of the father, right?
Yes.
Which is part of a noble mode of being, this enlightened mode of being. So
It's
even
bearing
though
the
he's been
cross, right?
shown that what his father was doing was wrong, he still takes responsibility for the effects of what was done.
Yep. And by doing so, he really earns the adoration of both Roshi and Goku. And he's starting to build this respect between our main cast by acting in such a way. And I
This
don't
also begins to woo
launch. I was gonna say.
launch,
I was about
right?
to say that. Yeah, yeah. It does begin to woo launch.
I don't know if that happens in this episode or the
I
next
can't.
one.
I can't remember either. And so then we finally see the forearm technique, and you can say that the forearm technique is the expansion of utility via the enlightenment that Tien has been able to extrapolate. Um, and this technique that he's able to use actually grows two arms out of his back. Now, the way it's visually represented is, let's say, overpowering, overbearing. It's supposed to be menacing in a way. And it's to say that someone who's achieved this level of enlightenment is capable of things that two people would be capable of in a normal way.
Yeah, I think that it it definitely is the way that they come up over the top and they're sort of reaching down. It's similar to that that we saw where there's that looking down, right?
Yeah. And
Sorry.
that's what I was meaning, right? That it's a menacing stance because it is almost to say that an enlightened person is worth two people.
Not only that, but there's this thing with four, with him having four. He's almost like a cross. Like he has to
Mm-hmm.
recenter himself. There's this idea that like if he were to be looking up to Shin, then he's sort of the top of this ancestral tree because he's supposed to be an ancestral father. And so to supersede him is to establish yourself as your own axis, as your own axis mundi, or as your own sort of, pillar. If you're going to be number one under the heavens, ultimately surpassing your master, which is what this whole tournament's about, right? Then that's what you have to do. And I also kind of take the four arms as him kind of centering himself and becoming that center of being for himself, where he's like, okay, this is it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see
Is
what you're
my
saying. Yeah,
mode
yeah.
of being, aside from me trying to emulate a false master like Shin, is my mode of being enough to be that pillar, right?
Right. Let's say this is him taking over for Atlas for a bit, let's say.
Sure, taking on the weight of what it means.
Well, the weight of the Crane School, because I like what you were saying there. Like with Shen gone, he's already realizing his responsibility of stepping into that role, especially for Chaozu, and so he emulates that by becoming what you were saying, right? I like your interpretation of it because it's him hoisting up. He's bearing his burden and bearing his suffering, right?
Right, he's at that center of being though too with that cross, right? Because it creates a cross across his arms.
Yeah.
And so it's a cross attack. A forearmed attack is like a cross attack. It's like an X, like X marks
Hmm.
the spot, right?
Yeah, and so and we know how Goku we know how Goku's going to deal with this, but this is actually where the episode ends. I think it's a good place to stop.
Yeah. We'll
Anything
expand
you
more on the arms in the next episode for sure.
Yeah, because we're going to see him use them and how they are ultimately dealt with and all that. So, anything you want to add, Brock, before we sign off on this one?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up.
It was a pretty succinct one, only 30 minutes. So we hope you guys enjoyed it. I forgot to do the plug in the beginning about likes and subscribes and all that. So I hope you guys enjoyed it because I don't know. I don't really like
Enjoy it this time.
enjoy
We'll
it this
nag you
time.
next time.
Yeah. But if you did like what you heard, well, if you like what you heard,
if you like what you
like
hear,
what you heard, well, I was gonna say, no. If you like what you heard, please give us a like, subscribe. We have new episodes Mondays and Thursdays on YouTube, Tuesdays and Fridays for Rumble. We'd like to hear what you have to say in the comments as well. This was Get the Mic talking about episode 99 of Dragon Ball Tien's Insurrection. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
And we hope you guys have a good night.